The dust from the gravel road hadn't even settled when I realized Landon wasn't coming back. I stood outside our rental cabin in Sedona, watching the red taillights of his Jeep Cherokee disappear around the bend toward the highway, and I thought, he actually did it. He actually drove away. It was our 4th wedding anniversary. We had planned this trip for 3 months, 2 nights at a cabin tucked into the Red Rocks, hiking the Cathedral Rock Trail, a dinner reservation at a restaurant I'd been wanting to try since before we got married. I had even packed his favorite trail mix because I remembered he mentioned once, offhandedly, that the cashew to cranberry ratio in the store brand was wrong. That's the kind of wife I had been. The kind who remembered the cashew to cranberry ratio. The argument started over nothing, the way they always did with Landon. I'd been texting my business partner, Drew, about a client quote that needed to go out first thing Monday morning. Drew and I had co-owned a small interior design studio in Scottsdale for 6 years. Long before Landon was ever in the picture. It was my company first. I built it from the ground up, using money from my grandmother's estate. Landon saw me texting at dinner and assumed the worst. I explained it was work, showed him the message thread. He didn't look. He just set down his wine glass, stared out at the canyon view, and said, "You always find a way to make me feel like I come second." I'd heard that sentence so many times over 4 years that the words had stopped having edges. I tried to explain again. He cut me off. I stopped explaining. We drove back to the cabin in silence. At 10:30 that night, he packed his overnight bag, took the keys off the kitchen counter, and said he needed space to think. "The car is a rental," I said. "We're 45 minutes from town. You'll figure it out." And then he left. I stood on the porch for a long time after the sound of the engine faded. The Sedona sky above me was enormous, absolutely crowded with stars. The kind of sky you only see when you're far enough from city lights to understand how small you actually are. I noticed all of it. The smell of the pin-on pines, the distant sound of a creek somewhere below the ridge, the cold already seeping through my cardigan. I noticed all of it because I was completely calm. That surprised me. 4 years of marriage had trained me to respond to Landon's moods like I was diffusing a bomb, very carefully, very quietly, one wire at a time. But standing there alone on that porch, I didn't feel the familiar panic. I felt something else. Something that took me a few minutes to name. Clarity. I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my phone. The Uber app said the nearest driver was 22 minutes away. I booked the ride. While I waited, I tried our joint credit card on the cabin's Wi-Fi payment screen to extend checkout by a day, just in case. Declined. I tried again. Declined. I opened my banking app. The joint account showed a 0 available balance. The credit card line showed a security hold placed at 9:17 p.m., approximately 12 minutes after Landon walked out the door. He hadn't just left, he had planned to leave. My hands were cold. I pressed them flat on the kitchen table and breathed in slowly. I thought about my grandmother, who used to say that the moment you stop shaking is the moment you start winning. I wasn't shaking. I opened a separate app. My personal savings account, the one I'd kept in my name only since before we married. Landon always called it the independence account. Like it was something slightly embarrassing about me, something untrusting. He never pushed me to merge it. Maybe he figured he'd get to it eventually. The balance was intact. I transferred enough to cover my expenses for a few days and felt the clarity sharpen into something harder. The Uber driver, a retired school teacher named Pete, who talked the entire 45 minutes about the history of Verde Valley, dropped me at a Hampton Inn off the 89A. I checked in, went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and started going through our finances. That's when my hands finally went cold in a different way. I'd had access to our joint accounts for 4 years, but rarely looked closely. Landon handled the big picture, he said. He was a financial advisor. It made sense for him to manage our investments, our mortgage, the business line of credit. I trusted him the way you trust someone when you've chosen to build a life with them. Completely. Without thinking about it too hard. The bank statements on my phone told a different story. Over the past 18 months, there were recurring wire transfers I didn't recognize. Amounts between $2,000 and $6,000, sent to a personal account I'd never seen. The recipient name was listed only as K. Weston. There were charges at restaurants I'd never been to on nights Landon said he was entertaining clients. Hotel reservations in Scottsdale, in our own city, on weekends when he claimed he was at a financial conference in Denver. There was a payment to a jewelry store I recognized, a nice one on Camelback Road. The receipt total was $4,800. I hadn't received jewelry from Landon in over 2 years. I called our bank's customer service line at midnight. The representative confirmed that the hold on the joint credit card had been placed by Landon using his account credentials and citing disputed charges pending review. The joint account had been restricted through an online feature normally reserved for reported card theft. He froze a joint account without my authorization? I asked. Both account holders have equal authority to place temporary holds, ma'am. You can dispute it at a branch. I'd like to request a full 6-month statement for every account under this household, I said. And I need it documented that the restriction was placed tonight at 9:17 p.m., specifically by the secondary account holder. A brief pause. Then, I'll note that on the account. I stayed up until 2 in the morning organizing every transaction I could access into screenshots, sorted by date, filed into a folder I labeled simply, Documents. Landon texted once, around 1 a.m. The message said, "Come home when you're ready to stop making everything about you. Rental cars due back Monday." He did not ask if I had a ride. He did not ask if I was safe. He did not include a single question mark. I screenshot it, saved it to the folder, and turned off the lamp. In the morning, I called Drew. "I need you to tell me something honestly," I said, "and I need you not to ask me why." Drew has known me since we were 24 years old, eating ramen in a shared apartment and talking about having a real studio someday. He said, "Okay." The business line of credit we took out last spring. The $80,000 loan to expand the studio. Walk me through how that was processed. A pause. Landon handled most of the paperwork. He said you were slammed with the Henderson project and asked if he could coordinate with the bank directly. You signed the initial application in January, at your kitchen table. I remembered signing something in January. I remembered Landon setting a document in front of me while I was on deadline, saying it was just the preliminary application and wouldn't be approved for weeks. I had believed him. I had signed it and gone back to my laptop. "Drew," I said, "I need you to pull every document related to that loan and secure the filing cabinet. Don't let Landon access anything today." A longer pause this time. "Rebecca, what is going on?" "I'll explain everything. I need you to do that first." I checked out of the Hampton Inn, rented a car, and drove back to Scottsdale. The 2-hour stretch on I-17 was flat and bright and indifferent, the kind of desert that doesn't care what you're going through, which was exactly what I needed. By the time I pulled into our driveway on Ironwood Ridge Lane, Landon's car was already there. I sat in the rental for 3 minutes. I called attorney Diane Walsh, a family law attorney a friend had recommended 2 years ago during another bad stretch with Landon when I had thought seriously about this and then talked myself out of it. I had saved her number. I wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe the same instinct that kept the separate savings account. Diane's office wasn't open yet, but she had an emergency line. I left a message with her service. Husband abandoned me out of state, joint assets restricted, suspected financial misconduct, consultation needed as soon as possible. Then I went inside. Landon was in the kitchen making coffee, like it was a normal Sunday morning. He looked up when I walked in. "You could have just called me," he said. "I would have come back." I set my bag on the counter. "No, you wouldn't have." He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Don't be dramatic." "Landon," I said, "who is Kay Weston?" The coffee maker gurgled between us. He didn't answer right away. He turned back to it and adjusted something that didn't need adjusting. "A client," he said finally. "Clients get paid by your firm," I said. "Not by our joint account. Not in 12 separate transfers over 18 months. He turned around slowly. His expression had shifted into something I recognized. A particular blankness, the look of a man deciding which version of events to offer. "You went through the accounts." "I've always had access to our accounts." "You were looking for something to use against me." "I was looking for why my credit card was frozen while I was stranded 45 minutes from town on our anniversary." He set down his mug. "I froze it as a precaution. You were upset. I didn't want you doing anything impulsive." I let that sentence sit in the air between us for a moment. I had been alone, in the dark, in a canyon cabin with no car and no money, and he had frozen our finances as a precaution. "Who is Kira Weston?" I asked again. His jaw tightened for exactly 1 second and then relaxed. Someone I've been helping out. She's been having a hard time financially. The $4,800 jewelry charge was helping her out. It was a gift, between friends. You're reading into things. I put my phone on the counter, with the bank statement facing him. 12 transfers, the jewelry purchase, hotel charges in our own city on weekends he'd claimed to be in Denver. He looked at the screen, looked at me, and picked up his coffee mug again. You need to calm down, he said. I put my phone back in my pocket and walked into our home office. The filing cabinet was unlocked. I went through it methodically, starting from the bottom drawer. Most of it was expected: tax returns, insurance documents, mortgage statements. Then, behind a stack of printer paper in the very back, I found a manila folder I had never seen before. Inside was a lease agreement for a one-bedroom apartment in the Biltmore area of Phoenix. The tenant was listed as Kira Weston. The guarantor, the person who had co-signed and agreed to cover rent obligations, was Landon. The agreement was dated 14 months ago. There was a copy of a wire transfer authorization attached. $15,000 for joint savings to cover the deposit and first and last month's rent. Landon's signature was on it. So was mine. Except I had never seen this document before in my life. I have a law degree I never practiced. My mother spent 22 years as a paralegal. I know what a forged signature looks like. I also know that my signature has a very specific way I loop the B in my last name, a habit I've had since the 3rd grade that has never once changed. That signature on the wire transfer was not mine. I photographed every page of the folder. At the very back was a single printed email dated 8 months ago from Landon to Kira. The last line read, "Give me a little more time. She doesn't know anything and she won't. I just need to get the business loan finalized and then we can look at the Tempe property together." I heard his footsteps in the hallway. He appeared in the doorway and saw the folder in my hands. "Where did you get that?" he said. "Bottom drawer. Behind the printer paper." "That's private. Give it to me." "It has my forged signature on it," I said, "so no." He went through the same sequence they all seem to go through when they're caught. Denial, first. I was confused. I signed so many documents, I must have forgotten. Then redirection. I was only looking for reasons to blow up the marriage. Then diminishment. Kira was just a friend who needed help. The situation had been blown completely out of proportion. Each time he spoke, I said nothing. I looked at him. By the 3rd attempt, even he seemed to hear how hollow it sounded. Finally, he sat down in the desk chair and put his face in his hands. "It got out of control," he said. "I know. I was going to fix it. You were going to fix the forged signature." He didn't answer. I didn't need him to. Drew texted me an hour later. Found the loan disbursement records. "Rebecca, $40,000 of the $80,000 was sent to a third-party LLC that's not under either of our names. I've already called the bank. Call me when you can." I called Diane Walsh from the front porch. She had already reviewed the message I'd left and was ready. I told her about the folder, the lease, the wire transfer. "Send me everything," she said. "Don't have any more unrecorded conversations with him. And go somewhere else tonight. Don't be alone in that house with him." I called Gail, who said she'd have the guest room ready in an hour. Gail has been my closest friend for 15 years. In a crisis, she doesn't ask questions, she just shows up. I packed a bag, passport, personal financial documents, my grandmother's jewelry that I kept separately in a box at the back of my closet, and the manila folder. Landon stood in the bedroom doorway watching me. "You're leaving," he said. "Yes. If you walk out with those documents, this gets complicated very fast." I zipped my bag and looked at him. "It was already complicated, Landon. You just didn't tell me." Barbara, his mother, called that night at 9. She had clearly been briefed, because she opened with, "Landon says you found some paperwork and misunderstood it, and he's very worried about where your head is right now." I sat on Gail's couch, with my 3rd cup of tea going cold beside me, and said, "Barbara, your son left me stranded in Sedona, without a car or money, on our anniversary. He froze his joint accounts. He co-signed a lease for another woman's apartment using a wire transfer with my forged signature on it. And there's $40,000 missing from the business loan that went to an LLC in a name I don't recognize." Silence. "I think part of you has always known who your son is," I said quietly. "I think you've been hoping I wouldn't." She hung up. She didn't call back. Diane and I met the following morning at her office in downtown Phoenix. She went through the folder page by page without speaking, filling a yellow legal pad with notes the entire time. "The forged signature," she said at last. "If we can prove it, and I believe we can, handwriting analysis is very straightforward. We are no longer looking at a simple contested divorce. We're potentially looking at wire fraud and forgery. That changes his negotiating position considerably." She looked up at me. "You kept a separate savings account." "From before we married." "Good. Do you have documentation of its origin?" "My grandmother's estate, fully documented." She nodded. "Then it's protected." I walked out of Diane's office into the flat Phoenix morning and stood on the sidewalk. My phone had 14 missed calls from Landon. 3 texts. 1 voicemail I listened to once, and then saved directly to the evidence folder. "Rebecca, I'm asking you to stop what you're doing before you damage things that can't be fixed." He still hadn't asked if I was okay. What came next came in pieces. Drew discovered that the LLC receiving the $40,000 was registered in Kira Weston's name, with Landon listed as a silent partner. The LLC had been incorporated 9 months ago. Our business attorney filed a separate report with our bank flagging it as a potential breach of fiduciary duty. Diane's office sent a formal inquiry to Landon's employer, a mid-size wealth management firm in Scottsdale, requesting documentation related to his handling of certain accounts. His firm's compliance department opened internal review. He was placed on administrative leave while they investigated. Then, Kira reached out. She messaged me through Instagram, a follow request, then a direct message. "I think we need to talk." I showed it to Diane, who said to use my judgment. I replied, "About what specifically?" She answered within 2 minutes. "He told me the two of you had been separated for over a year. He said the apartment was paid for with money he'd saved before the marriage. He showed me texts between the two of you. Ones I now realize were taken out of context or fabricated. I didn't know I was helping him steal from you." She continued, "I found out about the forged signature last week. My attorney told me that if I keep the apartment and stay quiet, I could be considered a knowing participant in the fraud. I don't want that. I'm sending everything I have." She sent 3 months of text messages from Landon, financial communications. A message where he explicitly said that his wife has zero visibility into the business side and to stop worrying. She sent it all to Diane, attached to a disclosure statement her own attorney had drafted. I don't know exactly what I felt reading those messages. Not rage, surprisingly, something quieter and more permanent. The recognition that I had been managed, very deliberately, for a very long time. The confrontation I hadn't planned happened at a professional networking event in Paradise Valley 2 weeks later. Gail saw Landon's name on the RSVP list. He had signed up before any of this started, back when we were still, in the eyes of our social world, a functioning married couple. Gail sent me the link. I almost didn't go. Diane said it was within my rights but to stay factual. "You don't need to perform anything," she told me. "The documents already did that." He was near the bar with 2 colleagues when I walked in. I watched his face move through surprise, then calculation, then that particular blankness. He excused himself and moved toward me. "Rebecca," he said low and controlled, "this isn't the place." "I'm just here for the networking," I said. A colleague of his, a woman named Janet, whom I'd met at 3 of these events over the years, came over and asked how I was doing. She'd heard things were rue between us. "We're divorcing," I said. "He left me without a car or access to our bank accounts at a cabin in Sedona on our anniversary. It turns out he's been using a wire transfer with my forged signature to fund an apartment for someone else. And $40,000 from our business loan was diverted to an LLC in that same woman's name. But I'm okay." Janet's face did something complicated. Landon put his hand on my elbow. I looked down at it. "Do you want to add physical intimidation to the list of things my attorney is documenting?" I said very quietly. He let go. His colleague, Greg, who had golfed with him for years, was staring at us both. "Landon, what is she talking about?" "She's upset," Landon said. "She's not seeing things clearly right now." "There's a lease agreement with my forged signature," I said to Greg, to Janet, to whoever was listening. "There's 18 months of undisclosed wire transfers from our joint account. My attorney's office is currently in communication with his firm's compliance department." I looked at Landon. "I'm seeing things very clearly." He picked up his jacket from a nearby chair and walked toward the exit without another word. I watched him go and felt nothing particular. Just a kind of quiet completion. Greg turned to me, genuinely pale. Rebecca, I had no idea. Most people didn't, I said. That was rather the point. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. The handwriting analysis confirmed the forgery. A forensic accountant Diane brought in traced $63,000 total in transfers that qualified as dissipation of marital assets. The LLC was dissolved, its assets frozen. Kira cooperated fully with the asset recovery in exchange for being excluded from the fraud findings. The apartment lease was terminated. Landon's firm completed their internal review and did not renew his contract. His professional licensing board opened a separate inquiry. He got the furniture. I got the house, the studio, and a cash settlement that covered every diverted dollar plus the legal costs. Drew and I relaunched the studio 6 weeks after the decree was final. We brought on 2 new designers and signed the largest commercial contract we'd ever pitched. On the day we closed it, Drew brought in a bottle of champagne and poured 2 glasses and said, "To building things that last." I thought about all the anniversaries I'd spent trying to manage Landon's mood. All the arguments I'd de-escalated, all the silences I'd filled, all the times I'd set my phone face down at dinner to prove I was fully present, fully devoted, fully not a problem. And I thought about standing on that porch in Sedona, watching the taillights disappear down that gravel road, with nothing but stars of overhead and cold coming through my cardigan, feeling, for the first time in years, completely calm. Landon thought leaving me alone in the dark, with no car and no money, would break something in me. He thought the right combination of pressure, financial, logistical, emotional, would keep me too frightened and disoriented to look closely at anything. He built that plan carefully, over 18 months, and he was wrong about every single part of it. And the thing is, he had all the information he needed to know he was wrong. He just never actually paid attention to who I was. I drive through the Biltmore area sometimes on my way to client meetings. Past the apartment building where Kira used to live, the one with the Spanish tile courtyard and the orange trees out front. I don't feel much when I pass it, just a quiet recognition. There it is. That's where some of our money went. That's a thing that happened. Then, I keep driving. The desert light in Phoenix in the fall is extraordinary, low and amber, long-shadowed, the kind of light that makes the mountains at the end of the day look painted. I notice it now in a way I'm not sure I did before. When you spend 4 years managing someone else's emotional weather, you stop having bandwidth for the ordinary beautiful things. I have the bandwidth now. I'm using it.